Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Grog Pod Roguelike podcast, where each episode of this we land on a roguelike game, we strip it for loot, and craft some kind of opinion on it at the end of the episode for our end of season recap at the end of the year. I am your trilby-wearing mutated space blob, host of a podcast, Scott Berger, and with me are my deep space convict co-hosts.
I'm some kind of a horrible FPS mutant, Andrew Harshman.
And I'm Colin, a sandwich you found on that ship.
Today we are jumping into the void with Void Bastards, FPS game released on May 29th, 2019, that you can sort of find everywhere between PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, and was published and developed by Blue Manchu Games, who are based out of Australia, and quite the pedigree, led who are led by Jonathan Che, who is the former director of BioShock 1 and 2, a game you may have heard of. Blue Manchu has also developed a free-to-play tactical RPG card game called Card Hunter, and as we record this, September 9th, 3 days from now, we are getting the spiritual successor to Void Bastards, Wild Bastards, also developed by Blue Manchu. This game was published by Maximum Entertainment, I think, who have also published a number of other notable rogue titles, such as One Step from Eden, Wizard of Legend, Ring of Pain, and Crying Suns. Void Bastards crashes into the space whale at number 180 of the most popular roguelike games on our list, with 5,137 total reviews. Andrew, this time you have the honor of describing what one does in Void Bastards with the limited amount of oxygen you have left.
Well, fortunately, in the 6 hours I've played this game, never run out of oxygen ever. So I could theoretically introduce this game for an extended period of time with zero problems. I have no idea what happens when the oxygen runs out.
I'm guessing you die.
Total kind of, well, they're like oxygen consoles that you can do. Anyway, all right. So you assume the role in this procedurally generated FPS game, quirky FPS game with a quirky sense of humor and quirky British accents and things of that nature, wherein you play a space criminal who's been brought out of cryostasis and has been given the opportunity to reduce their sentence by performing various tasks for some kind of group, I'm not totally sure. And those tasks involve going out in the far reaches of space and attaching yourself and docking with derelict space stations that are infested with various, well, not splicers, but like space mutants of various kinds. And it is up to you to loot. It is very much, it's kind of like a looter shooter, except the loot is boring and the shooting sucks. So that being said, I couldn't help but enjoy a fair bit of my time with this game. But yeah, procedurally generated space game where you play quirky characters with quirky traits, some of which are interesting, which can't always be said for randomly generated, randomly assigned traits. Void Bastards, which, I mean, the sequel is a like totally different setting, and so I'm interested to see like how much of that DNA pulls over.
Yeah,
comes over, gets transferred over, or is it just wild?
It is.
West?
Yeah, it is like it's like Wild West robots in space with kind of a lot of the same like humor and like artistic direction,
So
but
like
with like a slightly
RimWorld-esque in terms of like space western.
Yeah, but I would say even more like robot-y or sci-fi-y, because there's like a guy with like a flaming head. There's like one character who's just like a straight up spider lady. I don't
So
remember.
like Wild Wild West, the Will Smith movie from the early 2000s.
The Will Smith documentary, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was excited to jump into this. I was also excited to accidentally skip over the most important part of my preamble, which is how long people have played this game. Your average player is about 13 hours in it. There, I did it. Yeah, I was kind of
Boom.
excited to jump into this when Andrew picked it. 'Cause I'm like, aha, yes. I remember noodling around with this with Xbox Game Pass way like 2, 3 years ago. I'm like, yeah, I remember it being pretty fun, but I don't remember why I hadn't thought about it much since. And because recently, the Void or the Wild Bastards demo had come out a few months ago.
Has that
For
been removed from the internet? Because I
I believe
tried
so.
to
I
find
think it
it.
was for one of those time limited Steam demo fests. Because
I
yeah, I
see.
was like, oh man, one thing I took a note in my doc here was like, all right, while playing Void Bastards, am I just going to be wanting to play Wild Bastards the whole time? And maybe we'll come back to it in a minute, uh, but yeah, I thought like the the interesting aspect of Wild Bastards. I'm like, okay, yes, let's jump back into Void Bastards. It's been out a while. It's had some time to settle. We'll see what that's like and how it's gonna kind of set us up for success later this week. Um, I thought the first hour or so that I played of this was pretty good. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
Interesting. The first hour, because the first hour for me was like the worst part,
oof.
followed
Oh no,
by
I agree with Scott. Like
interesting.
I think the art of this game is really interesting, and I found the first hour or two to be like, oh, this is thrilling, this is like fun and interesting, and then it was that was it.
Well, it was. Whoa, Colin, you like that? Well, guess what? We got another 15 hours of that exact same thing for you.
Yeah.
That
Which, yeah.
that's far from ideal. That's for sure. Well, what happens in that first hour, pray tell? Actually, I'm sorry. Before we get into that, really quick, did you say it was number 180?
It is scroll. Yes, the 180th most popular roguelike game on Steam.
That that
5,000 reviews.
that is pretty surprising. Pretty
I wish that we
surprising.
could do something that like normalizes based off year of release, because I think definitely like the late, well, although I guess
It
this was
it kind
like
of
5 years ago now, right? It
in a
came out.
way, yeah, it released 2019. In a way, it kind of self-normalizes because like I feel like if a game is good enough, it will continue garnering reviews over time.
Yeah.
And even so, like if we do find one of these diamond in the rough games where it's like, it's like, number 500 or something on our list. I'm just scrolling through our previous episodes here. Like some games are like in the 1000s. Like Pineapple Smash Crew is at the bottom of our list here of popularity at the 1339th most popular game. uh, some of them are using hand wavy magic, but still, like,
Hmm.
you know, there's yeah, like I don't know, like review volume is one way to kind of garner popularity.
Yeah.
There's a million different metrics, but like that one I felt has always been kind of the most consistent for
I can see
normalizing a
how
little.
I can see how this game could get a large number of reviews specifically,
Right. Yeah, I think
because
that's a big
it
part of it.
is like Andrew proposed a couple of games for this week, and this one absolutely popped out to me as like, oh, that looks interesting. I wanted to play this game. Like it looked like I was excited to get into it because it's got a really cool looking art style. It's got a, I mean, maybe it's just got a good trailer. It looks snappy and poppy from the get-go. And I felt like, for the first half an hour, for the first hour, like I was 100% convinced that it was succeeding in its promise. So I can see why you could get people drawn in long enough to either decide to like it or not and then
Hmm.
review it.
Yeah.
Versus I think there's a lot of other games that I've liked a lot that uh, you like them despite their visual appeal or their initial they make a poor sell for the quality of the game. Um, I think this one like sells itself extraordinarily well,
Yeah.
perhaps too well.
I think we talk a lot
Perhaps.
about visual fidelity as like a first impression with games. And I think like there's a lot of games, traditional roguelikes especially, that have a bad problem with like, the graphics don't matter. It's all about the gameplay. But then you don't have that hook, that
Yeah.
immediate, you're on the store page like, oh, this looks interesting. you really have to kind of invest the time into understanding the gameplay system just to kind of get it. Whereas this, we're talking about a very visually distinct comic book art style in space that has kind of like a hard, chunky, like dirty Star Warsian
cartoon, a little bit of a cartoon vibe too. I mean,
yeah.
explicitly cartoon in the story stuff.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and good segue into how our story begins here with you being woken up into some sort of bureaucratic prison ship uh where your desiccated remains are rehydrated, and you're given the goal of, well, the ship has, classic Star Trek trope, floated into a nebula, and some wild nebula shit has happened. You got to restart the FTL drive. Get us out of here. And you're running around this tutorial ship, which is, I think this is a pretty good tutorial for what the game is going to entail.
Yeah, pretty
You're
good.
running around, you're like clicking on stuff to get some loot, and then pirates attack. And then all of a sudden you are running away from Glaswegian, Limmy's show accented pirates who are hunting you down. And I think you're forced to die in this sequence. I don't remember, but kind of kicking you
You
off.
are, yeah.
Yeah, but like
and I felt very cheated because I
felt cheated
definitely
because
made
I
it to
thought
the
I got
exit.
away.
Yeah.
well, the deaths, yeah, the death screen pops up so fast in this game. You're just like, wait, what happened? And then yeah, it kind of kicks you off on the loop of, all right, the pirates have kind of quote unquote, taken care of this derelict vessel and moved on. But luckily, there's thousands of other prisoner like dehydrated milk packages that are restarted, and this is kind of your character loop of like, oh, you're gonna start a new character, huh? Well, let's get a new dry powder packet to dump into the boiling water. And then you are sent on our favorite thing that we like to encounter in these games, an FTL style node traversal map. Where you're, I think this is I think pretty well done, where you are given a mission of, you got to go find MacGuffin number 1, and you have your node map laid out in front of you, and there's a little like blinking pulsating objective of, you got to go in this direction. And I think it's pretty good about directing you where to go. And you have all these different colorful spaceships to click on and say, all right, well, am I gonna travel to this one? Am I gonna spend the fuel to get here and the food necessary? Am I gonna board this guy to loot it? It starts to open up all the action space and really kind of kick off the game's mechanics.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Like explanation of where you're going. I thought the ships they did a pretty good job of explaining like what kind of things you might find on this ship. Yeah, and then you traverse to that ship, you board it through one of the airlocks, and then the goal is to get whatever loot you can off of the ship without at first I thought it was dying, but really it's without taking too much damage, because like many roguelikes, the damage is permanent and it's somewhat difficult to heal it. So like I was like, haha, I got off the ship with 3 HP, and then I was like, that's actually not great. I'm gonna get absolutely immediately killed on the next. And I'm dead. Like I had one shot, and I guess I get one shot plus like 15 HP from or however much you get from like resting during the jump and eating a sandwich.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got like 2 shot. So
and importantly, conserving your ammo too, because this game has a bit of a meta progression curve to it, where you're collecting stuff, and that stuff builds into things, and those things build into guns and components to guns and lots of other shooty McShoot'ems. And I see this game, all right, I'm going to open up this can of worms here. I see this game compared a lot to immersive sims.
I don't know what that means.
That is, well, like, so I mean, you've played like
ding, ding, ding. This is an immersive sim. I mean, it's designed by like an immersive sim guy. Yeah, and right out of the gate, here's how you know it's an immersive sim. This is the only requirement. If you go off this big laundry list, right? Check it out. All you need is right click is use. Like that's basically the main
Wait,
thing.
That's
If it's
what is an
that's
immersive sim?
now,
Give me a
have
game.
you played Deus Ex, like the original Deus Ex or any of the Dishonored games? It's like a game
No.
where it's like here's a semi-open environment and there are like multiple ways for there are multiple systems that exist for the player to use to achieve their goals. And that
The only
there's
game I
like, you
play where
know,
right click is used is Minecraft.
immersive
well,
sim.
well, it's very popular with like well, basically Deus Ex and the
Yeah, yeah.
Dishonored series and
Oh,
BioShock and System Shock and all that jazz. And
And the recent Prey remake. And I guess I should maybe also mention Cruelty Squad, everyone's favorite visual barfematic style immersive
Barfomatic
sim.
is right. But sorry, back to your point, Scott. So you see this compared to immersive sims. I don't think it quite, achieves the immersive sim. It doesn't quite climb that mountain and like get to the top and really deliver on that. But theoretically, there are like different ways to achieve things. Like you don't always have to fight. You can stealth. You can hack stuff. There are like, stuff. There's things like that. So it's kind
Mhm.
of there, but I don't know if this game had enough time or enough of a budget to really nail it.
well, I feel
Yeah.
like the problem is that maybe that it's immersive sim in that there are different ways that you could do it over the course of time, perhaps, but it's the same regardless. Like each time you die, you don't reset your loot. You keep the same like overall items that you have. So whatever strategy you've worked your way towards, you end up kind of keeping that strategy. So it's like, oh no, you got a new guy. Oh, he coughs now. It's like, cool. Are you a different build? It's like, well, no, because you have the same items you had before. So whatever was your good strat that last run is your strategy is going to essentially be the same thing. Like, oh, I'm going to poison dart this guy. I'm going to like
Mhm.
hack these turrets. Like maybe you put some work into getting a different, oh, I really tried hard to make sure that I could hack the turrets or something. But
Yeah.
that's not,
It's not so much that like your build is defined by the stuff that you pick up along the run. You're like, okay, now like it's that cardinal thing of like being able to like define what your build is at the start and like following a build order basically. And instead of just like, ah, yes, I've picked up this wild thing along the way. How can like what can I do around that to change my play style for this? I don't really think it hits that note, but
yeah.
it's a hard note to hit because like I feel like what Andrew was talking about with immersive sims, it's like you have a very bespoke, pre-designed puzzle that has a lot of different routes to solve it, which is like almost like the opposite of a roguelike game in a way. Um and well actually, you know what game did do immersive sim and roguelike meshing very well was Streets of Rogue, where you had like an objective. Here's like go and get this key from this gorilla or something.
Hmm.
Very kind of silly objectives. And the options that you had available were kind of all over the place. Your character as a hacker, you could hack into stuff in order to free the gorillas who would then pummel all the scientists to death and then who would then, break out and then you could get the key from the gorilla by pickpocketing or something. Like
Or you
that
could
as
be a
being
gorilla and just be like, hello, gorilla bro, let's break out together.
right, exactly. And while I was playing Void Bastards, I kept thinking like, am I going to be wanting to play Wild Bastards instead? I think I wanted to play a game that is kind of what Void Bastards is going for, but does everything better. Well, most things better. A little game called Heat Signature. And that is the game that was developed by Tom Francis, who just recently released Tactical Breach Wizards. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I was very sad when I realized that we really couldn't justify playing that on this podcast because I feel like we still might just be like, fuck it, it's not a roguelike, but it feels like it could be, so let's just play it and review it anyway.
we'll save that for the Patreon exclusive content. I think like Heat Signature, it's a space boarding game where you can do all of those kind of sandboxy immersive sim elements to much better degree. But I think that like Void Bastards is really good in that it is a first person shooter game, but I feel like it's super limited because of that technology. Because like there's so much visual complexity with like a three-dimensional environment that like if you tried to do like half the things that you wanted to do in Streets of Rogue or Heat Signature, like the most normal objective in Signature, one of the runs I did yesterday was like attaching onto a ship, stealthing around, like teleport, like swapping positions with enemies to like stealthily kill them and steal their key cards, and then like blowing up sections of the ship so I could like jump across the void of space to the other side. Like it was just like I'm just like, how on earth would you program any of that into a first person shooter? It'd be like almost impossible.
Or
But
at least it would be impossible for a small indie team. Like
that's
you could
true,
maybe do
yeah.
it if you had like Baldur's Gate 3 budget, but it'd be a different game.
Yeah, like the recent well, quote unquote recent, the more recent Prey game
Yeah.
uh kind of did that, where it was like, you have these uh like outside the ship space traversal elements, and you have like non-lethal takedowns and a lot more like stealth oriented like pacifist play style things, like picking up like very Half-Life style solutions of like picking up a thing and like barricading a door with it to keep the enemy from getting in. I feel like at least in the little bit of time that we've put in, and I think we all kind of got the Nebula depth too, so we all kind of know what this game's about. But like it didn't seem like a lot of those options were available. It's just like gun, bigger gun. That's kind of it.
Slightly different gun.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't feel like it was, for me, it was run around, click on green thing, which is
Hmm.
whatever. Like, like at first I thought it was like, oh, it's really clever. They've got the like color coding for all of the loot. Whenever you go in a room, it's green you find like they've got a wide variety of things that you can loot from, and that they've always got the little green to show what's lootable. But then it ended up just becoming like color scan across room, find green, click green, leave, interact with nothing else in any other way.
Yeah.
Um,
And then trying to figure out which of that stuff I picked up was Plaz that I needed
well,
for
no,
for
I didn't even
crafting.
matter. Like I didn't. I would like get to the end of like a ship and be like, I wonder what I got.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't even look at the like, oh, you picked up something. It's like I don't. It makes no difference to me what I'm picking up in the during the mission. Like I'm going to grab whatever's there. There's no indication on the map of like what the things are, so that you can't make informed decisions on this. You're just
Hmm.
going and finding whatever crap's lying around, and you're taking it all back. You don't have an inventory, you don't have a weight limit. Like there are no decisions to be made except for try to get more loot or call it quits and go back to the ship.
Yeah. I might fight back just a touch on that because fuel at the very least is shown on the map. And like there are some times where you do have to kind of make a tactical decision, a very light one of like, all right, I have 2 minutes of oxygen. This place is swarming with bad guys and stationary turrets. What route am I going to take through this ship to get some fuel, maybe get some staples or handgun bullets along the way if I see them?
Yeah, but that's the
Maybe
thing
I.
is like if you see them, but there's no way of you're going to grab everything that's on your route,
Mhm.
regardless of if it's bullets, because it's there. By the time you get to see if it's bullets or not, you're there, and there's no downside for picking that up. There's not an
Yeah, it's
encumbrance. It's
Which
just
I gotta say, thank God there's not encumbrance. There's
yeah, no, I don't
that would
like
have been dreadful.
encumbrance,
But
but
I know what you're saying. It's like you're not really making an interesting decision about like what to take.
yeah.
There is,
Since
I
since
did find
Will since Will
myself.
has been liquefied and ejected in the vacuum of space and isn't here today, I have to you know project through the something about interesting decisions
For
for him.
sure. And the on paper, the it seems like this game should be full of interesting decisions, like which wreck, which space hulk that's floating in the nebula am I going to stop at and invest time and potentially my life in trying to get the items from? And like I think that's a really like cool concept for a game, but it doesn't unfortunately quite work in this one. And there was, as you said, Scott, a bit of a tactical decision of like going in and trying to find the correct route. And oftentimes, I would go to a ship and I would, go to the FTL, of course, because that's where the fuel is.
Mhm.
And I'd try to get to the helm to activate the map and get food, because those are the two main things that you kind of are required to have. Is you need fuel to make your space jumps. If not, you can't get around quickly, and all your food goes away, and you die. And you gotta have the food, or else you die. So yeah, I'm super curious about the development cycle for this game. It kind of seems like the visuals and like the art style are intentionally kind of streamlined. Like they look good, but they're streamlined so that the game could have like a super massive amount of depth, but that is not there. So I don't know. Again, ran out of time, ran out of money, et cetera, et cetera. Not sure.
I almost feel like I think I agree, and I almost feel like Void Bastards is like the tech demo setup for Wild Bastards in a way,
Hmm.
because, and I'm hoping that this is true. We'll find out in 3 days, but from what I played of the demo for Wild Bastards, I'm like, man, yeah, this is like, it has the great art style, has the great voice acting in Void Bastards, by the way, top notch, or should I say, oi, top notch, yeah. Uh, and just like the sound design, I think that like it's like firing on all cylinders except for like um gameplay maybe, or like compelling gameplay. Um and when I was playing Wild Bastards, I'm like, okay, this has kind of like maybe a more sort of like Counter-Strikey style duel to it as opposed to looting a ship. But it did feel like it had more interesting decisions. It felt like it had more of kind of a narrative drive to it. And so I feel like the the aspect of like developing Void Bastards, they probably came up with a lot of things that they wanted to do, but were like, maybe we should save that for the sequel. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that Wild Bastards will kind of deliver on all these things that we're sort of complaining about with, limited options in the game, and I think the story.
I'm gonna say like having coming off of our Slay the Spire episode, I think that you can get away without having you can still be a very, very, very good game without having a story,
Uh-huh.
but you have to make up for it with something else.
I'm
Like,
fine with a game having like no story. I feel like I'm less fine with a game having a bad story or something that like makes me feel like, well, like what was the point of that? Where like with Slay the Spire, like it's the title of the game. Like your goal. That is your thrust to do the thing. There's
it's a
not really like,
quest. It's just
yeah,
it's just to give you here's your quest, go do it.
a talking space whale gives you a quest and you're like, all right, yep, can't argue with that.
Yeah,
Versus,
not enough space whales in this space game. I feel like is a
Isn't
problem.
there like a space whale that goes and eats ships somewhere?
yeah, you better have some
Andrew, didn't
torpedoes
you
or
get eaten
it'll.
by a space whale?
I was on a pretty good run, and I had a lot of ammunition, and I was having a good time. And I was kind of hard on the looting earlier. I kind of enjoy the gameplay loop and the that flow you get into. But anyway, yeah, I got eaten by the whale, and it does tell you like this whale eats ships, but. I mean, it was in the direction I wanted to go, and I'm like, oh, cool. Like, so it's gonna like trigger some kind of special event, or like it's going
Yeah.
to
I thought it
shoot
just got
me
rid
out
of
to a different
like
spot.
nodes that you could go to.
No, it just I clicked on it and it said you have died. I was like, well, why didn't you?
You've been eaten by a
Could
brew.
you?
Yeah, it's like, are you sure you want to go there? You will die if you do
It's
this.
like, well, why'd you even give me the option? Like, this seems totally asinine.
Or what
But
what would be a fun idea is like it eats ships, so then you board the whale and you have to fight your way out of it. Like
sure,
I
Or
yeah, totally.
something.
I feel like there's a lot of things that I wanted out of this game that I feel
Hmm.
like the tech would probably limit it, because yeah, like first person, like a procedurally generated first person shooter environments are probably super hard to do. And like we saw, with Nightmare Reaper, the kind of style of um like Void Bastards has it's very deceptive in that it's a kind of like a 2.5D game where all the character sprites are like the flat 2D thing, but they have
Yeah.
so much character to them that you're just like, oh yeah, of course that was a 3D monster that I was
I
fighting.
will make a comment on that though, is that they only have like 3 animation frames, and it does become apparent after a while that is they're like they like hover and then they flash into their next thing, and then when you kill them, they like chick 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 down, and
Mhm.
it's you don't notice it at first, but then later, as you defeat the same enemy over and over again, you're like, you really aren't like fully animated. You're keyframed
Mhm.
with nothing in between.
Yeah, I
And which
mean,
is the 2.5D, and the game does a very good job of like making you feel like it's 3D,
mhm.
except for in those enemy sprites,
Yeah, where
which
it's
I think would be hard on a living internal whale spaceship.
um
Sure. I think the animations are fine. What I do not think are fine is I think while the art might be good, I think the character designs are all like pretty abysmal.
Like for
you
the
mean like the
enemies.
enemies
Almost all
or
of them. Like the janitor enemy is like for me when it comes to FPS design, like you gotta nail like your bread and butter enemies that you're going to be seeing a lot of and you're going to be fighting
Hmm.
up. They need to look good, they need to sound good, they got to be fun to kill, and
Hmm.
they need to be like not too hard but not too easy. I think the cultist monks in the game Blood are like the perfect example. It's like they are so fun to kill, and they've got all sorts of fun animations and exciting stuff. They make funny noises, but they're also like fairly capable. So like you do need to be
Grunts and
careful.
elites in Halo.
Mm.
Very different,
Absolutely.
very
Yes,
interesting, very
yes.
distinctive.
100%. And as a result, it's like, well, they're not completely, they're not total pushovers. So you do feel good about having bested them. And I think the janitor is like a total miss. It's this like floating guy who shoots bolts of like plasma out of his mouth or something. And then you've got like the Juves, which are like these little kids who the voice acting is good and charming, but they don't have enough lines. They just keep saying I see your butt face or whatever, surprise butt face. Um,
Oi,
and
you. Oi.
oi, and then like the other like bread and butter enemy is the tourist, which is a person who went out to space as a tourist and then got like, stuck and infected with space mutation or space radiation or something, and is now like this it's a person with a hat and like sunglasses and like a coat, like they're a tourist, and they look kind of cute, but here's the downfall with this particular enemy design is that they're just annoying as hell. They explode and it's like a huge radius and it's like a huge
Well,
drain on your resources, at
they're
least
like
early in the build,
they're
early in
walking
a run.
proximity mines, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
which is
not
like
super fun to fight. They're not hard, but they just make you backtrack a lot.
Yeah.
in my experience, my early playthroughs until I got like upgrades and enough ammo to deal with them. It's like initially, I don't know about you all. I was like, it was like playing like a survival horror game. Like I didn't have enough ammunition to do anything, and I couldn't be wasting bullets on blowing up these little tourist people. Um, but anyway, that's my little, I don't know, FPS design corner.
Yeah, and
Um,
I feel like we kind of touched on like the crafting system and the progression unlocks of the weapons sort of being a like an anti-pattern with how we've seen other rogue games do, like, oh, you reroll a new character, this person has a crowbar, a a glue gun, and a teleporter device or something like that. And you're like, all right, what can I do with these things throughout this run in order to be successful? Versus just like, oh well, I've unlocked the shotgun, this other thing, and this other thing, and I'm just going to use the shotgun the whole time.
Yeah,
Um,
there's synergy, but there's not like synergy within your run. It's like synergy over the entire game.
yeah. And I'm
which
sure that people who have beaten this on like hard bastard super Iron Man mode are just like, well, I mean, if you've just unlocked the 65 weapons that are in the game, then you'll know about all the different item synergies, which is probably fair, but I don't think the game delivers that incentive early enough to players, where this is why we saw the average player has about 13 hours in this game, is that, yeah, like I could totally see you play like 10 hours of this, you're like, all right, I got it, I'm gonna go play Spelunky for another
I
75
got
hours
it.
straight.
But very possible, very possible. Are there that many guns? Surely not.
There, I thought there, well, there's guns and there's also equipment. Um,
Right,
and
you have like 3 item slots. So you have like
yeah,
your
you have like
primary.
3 item slots, and I'm trying to click around to find the answer to this, but I think it was like, I don't know, like an 8x8 grid of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I,
here we go.
I,
We got
I,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait,
There's
1, 2,
probably like
3,
30
7 by.
things.
It's yeah, like a 7x7 grid of things like the Rift Hunter, or well, I guess to be clear, half of these aren't weapons. Some of these, so like for example, your bread and butter, your pistol that you start with has an add-on called the Bullet Hunter, which at first I was like, okay, great, this is gonna make like my bullets curve around doors, or like it's gonna make my gun like shoot through walls and stuff. Um, that I believe unlocks the ability for you to find bullets in your later runs.
yeah, exactly. I do remember that actually. That
Uh,
node.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember unlocking that. I'm like, okay,
I,
and
I found,
yeah,
well, I just wanted to, I guess, talk about the weapons and the potential of synergies. I found 2 things that you could maybe call synergies, which were um, the throwing a grenade, a bushwhack, as they call it,
Mm.
a mine onto a turret, and then shooting said mine with my gun to set it
mhm.
off. And then the other one was switching to the taser the electric weapon
Yeah.
and tasering a robot, and then switching to my shotgun and getting close and shotgunning it. So I mean, there are like some combos to be had, and those things were like, fun to do.
Or
And
you zap the turret, then you go up and you reprogram the turret so it's on your side.
this is true.
And then
This
you
is
lure an enemy into it. Like that's okay. That was like some interesting, fun gameplay
totally that is
the first couple times you did
that
it.
is neat. This is true. It's just unfortunately those like interactions between the systems aren't quite. I feel like they need to be a little bit deeper. And there are
And
like fun like
for
little. Mhm.
and for a game that takes place in space, barely any amount of like shunting enemies out of airlocks, which
Yeah, what
I,
was the point of the of the airlock thing? Can you
So
lure people into it?
the point of the airlocks is you can get the gun that lets you suck them up and like put them into void space, and then you unvoid them into the airlock, and then you can blast them out into space.
I see. I think that is a great example. So sometimes in your randomly generated ship layout of a ship that you dock onto, which is I've done pretty seamlessly and pretty well, and I think is good. And it is very difficult to do, especially in like an FPS, to like make the level design interesting when it's done like randomly. So sometimes in your random layout, you get a room with like a airlock chamber, a la like Alien or Aliens, and you can press a button and anything in the chamber gets shot out into space. But like generally I think that's just a good example of like I'm sure they had grander plans for that,
yeah.
and that they were going to figure out more ways to utilize that other than enemies that just happen to spawn already in there and waiting for you to airlock out into space, and enemies that can be placed there with the void gun that you're
Mhm.
describing, Colin.
A very common tactical maneuver in heat signature is to like grab your objective and then throw yourself out the airlock,
Yeah.
or like shoot out a window and jump out the spaceship and then detach, like remotely detach
Ooh,
your spaceship and have it come and like rendezvous with you and pick you up. I think like
wow.
50% of all missions that I do in heat signature are like that. And it's just like it feels so good. And I feel like this game is just like, there's so much you could do in this space. And that's why I think that like Wild Bastards might be better, because it's maybe more grounded in like um in that kind of possibility space. We're like, oh yeah, you're just like you're on a planet. Okay, great. You don't have to worry about oxygen. You don't have to worry about all these other wacky
Well,
systems.
again, to be clear, I never worried about oxygen. I think it's a goofy mechanic. So is there a map in Wild Bastards?
There's a ship map that when you first dock, I mean, that's the first thing that I check whenever I first dock onto another thing. Where's the helm? Where's the main computer? So I can download all the loot locations of the loot. And well, I guess yeah, you also have your FTL node traversal map, but like the ship map itself is interesting because it has a randomly kind of like laid out. I think there's some like predefined ship designs, but like generally randomly connected things between like your generator, your atmosphere zone, your hab, your theater, all sorts of things where like in those zones, I guess maybe you need those unlocks in order to reliably find like the bullets and sandwiches in them. But you go in there and like some of the doors might be locked, some of like the power might be out in parts of the ship or the whole ship. And I think like the game does a pretty good job of like that kind of thematic element of like, all right, I'm boarding the ship. There's no like power to any of the doors. They're all wide open. I can't close any of them until uh until I put the power back on. But if I turn the power back on, then the turrets are going to come back online. There's some good amount of decision making there. But yeah, I mean, I really just wanted to be able to like, oh man, all right, I've hacked into the security camera system on the opposite side of the ship. I'll make like a thunking noise to draw all the enemies over, and then I'll sneak around them to get to the power lockout and lock them all into that room. And then I'll just like set up some explosives and blow off that part of the ship. Like heat signature has just ruined me for those kinds of expectations. Uh, Whereas with this, like, I'm not saying that this
Holy
game
moly.
yeah, I know. I'm not saying this game needs it, but that's like when you're saying something is an immersive sim,
I'm gonna
that's
go ahead and
kind
say
of
it
like,
needs it.
yeah, I mean, like that's at
Gotta
least
have it.
that's the kind of like options that I want. And I feel like even Prey had that kind of stuff of like, all right, I'm gonna like spec my character in this direction, and then like, yeah, I'm gonna be like this stealthy cyber hacker, or I'm just gonna be like a brutish like melee punisher kind of thing. And yeah, like different game budgets, of course, but um
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I think
mean, I'm gonna say the same thing like I say for solo dev efforts. Like, well, if you can't manage your ambition to do it, then you shouldn't do it. Like
well,
if your studio isn't gonna have the budget to implement the things that you need to have a fun game, then you should make a different game.
yeah, I guess you don't know if it's going to be a half-baked idea until like halfway through development though.
Fair. Well, okay, fine.
I
Maybe
get
you're
where you're
allowed to
coming
do
from though,
it, but
Colin.
I don't have to like it.
That's true. No, you do have to like it.
That's
Okay,
true. That's
I love
true.
it. You've
Um,
you've, you've changed my mind.
Yeah.
Indeed, the game sort of, I don't know, seems to, I don't know if it necessarily like promises like, hey, this is going to be an immersive sim where you can, do all of this wild, wacky, cool stuff and like really creatively come up with ways to use the environment and your tools against the enemies. I don't know if it necessarily is making that promise, but like a lot about the game suggests that that was in the design document.
Hmm.
That was like, and that they didn't quite get it done. Like they couldn't even get the windows to work properly. You can't jump through windows consistently. Like what, what is going on there? I just stopped trying to even go through windows. All right, I'm a little bit curious about y'all's early game experience because my experience was like I ran out of ammo immediately, and and I yeah, I ran out of bullets immediately, and so I was having to like run around enemies instead of shooting the little explodey tourist guys. I had to like trigger them and then run as quickly as possible and jump at the last minute to get out of their range. Very unpleasant. Um, but yeah, so I ran out of ammo, and then I was in this horrible loop of like trying to find ammunition, not really wanting to engage with the game's stealth mechanics because I found them incredibly boring. And yeah, and it wasn't until I got enough unlocks and got enough additional health and some better weapons and more weapons, and started getting into runs where I was able to like go to shops and buy a bunch of ammo. It wasn't until I started stockpiling ammo and upgrades that I started having fun with the game.
Hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
like 2 hours in, 3 hours in.
I feel like I had the opposite experience. I mean, I did have the tension of ammo,
Mhm.
which did force me to change my gameplay style. I was initially just run and gun and shoot at them until they die, and it was a little bit more like stealth, pop pop, run away. If you see like the big enemies, just run, do not engage. Um, but maybe I just got one of the ships that provides a lot of ammo pretty early. Because I felt like I enjoyed the early tension, and then as I started to get some of the upgrades, I was like, well, I'm not. The upgrades made me better at the game, but did not satisfy me. Like this isn't making me play differently. It's just making like the game is getting easier from this perspective, but then the enemies are getting slightly tougher,
Mhm.
and it's we're going in lockstep, and therefore I'm not like changing anything. Eh,
There was one funny aspect where I was on one ship, like very survival horror-y, trying to hide away from like the steps. But like again, the sound design in this game is great because you can like 3D audio like pinpoint where in the next room like the enemy is walking around. You're like, okay, I know he's gonna be coming around that corner, and then I'll try to like sneak stealth my way around the other way. And like in one vessel playing like very strategic and stealth oriented. And then in the next vessel, I was like random like trying to unload as many bullets into this barking dog robot as I possibly could, uh trying to get it to drop its loot stuff. And I just thought that like this is a very funny visual of me just like chasing this barking dog, like arf,
Die,
arf, arf,
Robo
bam, bam,
Dog.
bam. Um and yeah, I think that like there were elements where the limited ammunition had me making decisions of like, okay, do I take the poison dart gun this time, or do I take the shotgun? Do I take the grenades? Do I take this other thing? And I think that like that was okay, but it wasn't. I wanted that the engineer level decision making of like, aha, yes, I can construct a thing to like block off passages or hack into stuff. And it felt more shootery as opposed to because like in Deus Ex or other ImSim games, like you have those options. You have that like, I'm gonna just like Spider-Man my way around the ship and try to like cling to the ceiling and avoid everybody in this
Or
mission.
I'm gonna sneak through the air ducts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the fact that there's no air ducts or like
There are, but there are a few, but there's not
yeah.
really. It's not extensive enough to be a viable way to play the game.
And you would think if you're just running on your own personal oxygen, you could just like clamber around the outside of the ship until you got to a window and then like shoot through it and then get into the ship that way. But anyway,
That's way
uh,
outside of scope. Now, okay, well, interesting. Okay, so at least, the game did support a few different play styles, kind of, sort of ish, because our early game experiences were very different. Now, you're talking about how, like, the equipment and the unlocks you both mentioned, do not encourage, like, new gameplay styles, new strategies and things. That is, I think, in my experience, was pretty true. But something that I did want to mention that I think the game does pretty well is that when you get assigned a new character, I think you get like different starting resources. I didn't notice a huge difference, but more importantly, you get different starting DNA, genetic traits, genetic
Yeah,
quirks.
yeah.
And I applaud the game for having little random quirks that actually make a tangible gameplay difference. Um,
Yeah, actually, and they were interesting.
they were interesting. Like I was telling you about how frustrated I was getting with not having enough ammunition to deal with the exploding tourists and having trouble dodging their abilities. I eventually, in my early runs, got a random trait which was does not trigger tourist explosions. And I was like, oh,
Whoa.
what a godsend. This
Huh.
is incredible. This is so useful. This is so helpful. And so that was fun. Some other specific traits to call out. There are different heights,
Yeah, did you get,
which
I was gonna ask, did you get the short
I
there was
got
the
the
run?
short
yeah, I got
height
the odd
and
job mode also.
there was the tall height, and like it's simple, but it makes a significant difference or perspective in the 3D environment. And like, wow, it
It
really,
was
really
so
makes a difference.
startling when I finally died on the short guy run and I went to the next run. I'm like, oh,
Whoa.
wait, my perspective is substantially different.
I found myself once I got to the like 4 or 5 hour mark and I was starting to get to this really fun like FPS and looting flow. I found myself longing for the short stature
Hmm.
trait because I thought it might make bunny hopping better because because I was bunny hopping around and in certain rooms you hit the ceiling and you and it like slows you down. So I'd like to experiment with that at some point. What else? There's a trait that highlights loot. Like there's specific like loot nodes on the map which are outlined in like green, as you say, like the different chests and things and lockers and um, pieces of luggage. But there's also just random loot sitting on the ground, and that's less noticeable. So there's a trait that highlights it. Um, and there's something else here about now that all that being said, the absolute worst trait, in my opinion, to get is the colorblind trait because then you cannot see those green
Oh no.
Oh, I never got
notifications.
that one. That sounds
I,
brutal.
I got that one several times and it just makes the world black and white. And I was like, oh no. So I appreciate that the game did that. And it's also fun
I
that it
liked the
randomly
negative,
generates
the
go ahead.
cough or was it smoker or coughing?
Right. Yeah,
That one I thought that was really interesting. Like it absolutely messes up trying to do stealth stuff,
yep,
which I
yep,
thought
Mhm.
yep.
was like, oh, this that's where that's what frustrated me because I was like, okay, this is something that could drive a different type of gameplay. You
Mhm.
It's like an anti-synergy which forces you to go down a certain path, but then they don't build on it because there's not really a way to like change out your kit. It's like, well, it drives me to like pick different weapons when you start off from the ship, I guess.
It would be better, I think, as like an item that like you start with. Like you start with cigarettes that you can use to identify like laser grids or things like in a very Metal Gear Solid scenario, but it makes
Sure,
you
it
Sure.
gives you.
cough.
But
And
just
then,
something that interacts with it in a way
yeah.
like that different. It's like, oh, it's like this very interesting trait that changes your gameplay style, but then there's no way for you to react to it.
Mhm.
Right.
There's no decision that's based off of that, except for I guess I'm going to shoot more because now stealthing is less effective.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I do wish that there was a little more depth with that. It's unfortunate. Gosh, I wasn't even thinking about that like until you mentioned it. There's very little what is the term for this? Like your drops informing your strategy, like you having to make interesting strategic decisions based on what you are randomly assigned or what you
Yeah.
randomly come
I
across.
mean, I feel like in other games I'd end up calling it synergy eventually,
Hmm.
but I feel like it doesn't quite get to the level of
Right.
synergy.
And we were talking about it, even though I complained about how I felt the synergies were kind of camouflaged and hidden. We were talking about it all over last episode, where it's
Right.
like you're on a run and you get a specific selection of cards and go, oh, or a specific relic, and now I got to do a shiv run. Now I got to do a poison run, et cetera, et cetera. And those types of moments in a run are exciting.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not quite here. Did either of you get to I think I got to Nebula level 3, maybe. Um but I embarrassingly like didn't get many of the key quest items. And I kind
You
of
know,
expected that, well, when I assemble the ID card, surely I'll go back to the hab or whatever, and there'll be
mhm.
like some sort of a bespoke story section or like a special event that I
Some kind
need to
of
do.
breather
And
sequence.
like at least there was like a cinematic. So that's something. But I was thinking about Will discussed a while back about there being bespoke sections in 7 Days to Die where it's like, here's like, sort of a tailor-made cool cinematic sequence, like a set piece
Yeah.
section. And I was hoping for something like that. And at some point, Scott, you sent us like a review about Void Bastards that sort of illuminated that apparently there's nothing like that. There are like special random events where it's like, oh, pirates show up, or oh, the security bot has been activated, and will end your life shortly. Thank you for your understanding. Uh, and that stuff is like cool when you're on the ship and like unexpected things happen that do make you change your plans, which is great. But apparently there's no like boss battles or anything, or like special like I was hoping for like milestone ship encounters of some kind, which I guess don't exist, and that's very
Yeah,
disappointing to know.
I feel like this game is the other side of the coin from our Lone Star episode, where that game was like it was nothing, it was just like the boss battles effectively. And you had like, you had some like interesting spins on the FTL style like non-combat event encounters. I mean, there's basically no event encounters in this game. But whereas Lone Star, I feel like the art style was a little, I don't know, like not there yet or like not engaging. The art style here is super engaging, but the gameplay really isn't there. And so I feel like if you just combined those two games together
Merge
somehow
them.
into some,
Merge
unholy
them.
trinity or unholy duality, then yeah, like it would be something cool. Cause like, yeah, I was super pumped. I missed getting the first MacGuffin thing the first time because I had like a split path where like one path was gonna go down into a mine, and if I did that, I would die. Which again is another problem that I have. It's like give me some like way to like strategize around that, right? Like
Mhm.
Well, I mean,
even
you
if
can, your strategy around that is just make sure that you have enough health not to die.
yeah, but I
It-
don't think that's as interesting as like a pop-up that's like, all
No.
right, you've landed on the mine thing or you've entered the minefield. Are you gonna like, you have a 1 in 5 chance of making it through. Which path are you gonna pick? Like click, 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 click. Oh, through the
mhm.
thank the dice rolls that I got through. But like in the node traversal thing here, there's confusingly like well, yeah, I don't know, like I misread the map and I thought I could
I
go
too did that.
backwards and I
Indeed.
couldn't. And I was like, God damn it. So I
Yeah.
restarted and then I finally got to the MacGuffin of Act One, picked it up. I'm like, all right, something's gonna happen. I think it played like one of the comic book style things of like the stuff popping up, which is neat. It's fun, it's cool. But I'm like, all right, now what? Like I'm gonna go back to the ship and do something. And then I just kept exploring. And then I
Yep.
kept going to the second MacGuffin. I picked that one up and it was the same kind of deal. And I'm like, all right, what are we building up to here? And yeah, there's no big boss fight. There's no big
Yeah, it
bad.
really killed my motivation when you posted that. I was like,
Like
oh, this is
surely.
it. This is all we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it kind of a no-brainer to be like, well, at least, once you collect all the FTL parts and you get all of the bureaucratic items that you need, your ID card and your printers and et cetera, like it
You
feels
have to
like a
fight the
no-brainer
Void
to be like,
Bastard.
you have to fight the Void Bastard, or you have to be on the ship and like guard it from an
Hmm.
attack while
Yeah,
the
while it's
FTL
charging
powers
up.
up,
Yeah.
right? Like that's like
Halo
so
style.
obvious. That's like the default option. And it's up to you game designers to do something interesting with that or come up with something else interesting. But
It's a
instead,
decision
there's
not to
just
do
like,
that at this point.
yeah, and again, feels like they're running out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, there's some good ideas here with like space pirates. I think that the space pirates kind of allude to some sort of story element of like, well, you have to imagine that I'm from God, um what is the Lemmy's show bus? You have to imagine that I'm from Yolka and I'm
what?
a space pirate and that
Yeah.
the space pirates allude that oi, what's gonna happen I'm glad that no people from Scotland are listening at this point because they've all tuned out after the first bad impression that we tried doing. But
Bad. Oh, come on.
uh what's going to happen when the main space vessel that the player
When
character is on
the
leaves the
hab gets,
and they're like,
yeah, sure.
oh, they're gonna find us and blow us to blow to bits. They are And I'm like, okay, that's some kind of story thing, but like,
Right, sure. They are invested in keeping you here.
yeah,
Sure,
like
sure,
shouldn't
sure.
shouldn't the pirates have more of an outsized impact on like the gameplay and stuff? But yeah, they just kind of show up to wreck stuff every so often.
And they absolutely wrecked me. Like the one proper pirate encounter I had, I was shocked at like how tough
The
they
only way
were.
to win is not to play with pirates.
Yeah, and I really should have hoofed it. I tried to. I had the heartbeat update, so like or upgrade, so I got killed once, and then when I came back, I was like, time to run, but they were very quick. And that kind of stuff, those random events and stuff, I so appreciate in a rogue game. The one random event I don't like is that sometimes you'll be on your way to the exit after having looted, and then suddenly the power on the ship will go out and you have to go all the way back to the power area. You gotta backtrack. It's like the worst type of FPS backtracking, backtrack and reactivate the power, and then and now sometimes occasionally it's interesting because there's a few enemies that you left or whatever. But like, please give me like a little countdown or something, and that would be exciting. Like, oh, the power's gonna go down in 10 seconds. I really gotta hoof it to the
Mhm.
exit or whatever. Um, yeah, so there you have it. And I was excited to try at a certain point. I'm like, okay, I got to try Wild Bastards. I know there's a demo around here somewhere. Let me find it. Oh, it's gone.
Well, you
Um,
got 3 days before it comes out. All right,
yeah,
I've got my new Scottish accent here going.
yes, sir. Let's rock and roll.
Void Bastards Pirate, take one. What the holy fuck is that box unit doing? The stuff it has those bastards cracked and doesn't make any
Mm,
sense. And then voice line number two, take number one.
Good.
mm.
It's a box unit. I'll be sending the poor halfwit off to find a fancy wee diddle to brush the teeth with soon. There you go.
Outstanding, outstanding.
I would just call it
Yeah,
standing.
I appreciate a bit of
None of that's going
I
to come
see.
through on the audio. It's going to come like,
I didn't catch I did not pick up on that world building. So yeah, it's too bad. But hey, we have sort of a pseudo number two coming here soon. So that's swell.
yeah. And I'm
Um
excited to see like more of the synergies involved there because like I think like on any given one of like the little combat missions, you can like flip back and forth between two different hero units.
Yeah.
And like okay, I'm gonna be like the spider lady here, and then I'm gonna switch to like the sniper horse guy, and like the character designs are just they're so hilarious. I feel
Yeah.
like Void Bastards has done a pretty good job in the art department, but I think Wild
which
Bastards is
I
gonna.
realize this isn't a review or a preview of Wild Bastards, but real quick, sorry. So you can you before you start a mission, you select two of the Wild Bastards. Is that correct?
Your goal is to kind of like traverse space while being hunted by a space fuckboy essentially. And your goal is to kind of like collect your scattered crew throughout this throughout space or throughout the Badlands as it were.
I
Um
see.
and
But
then yeah, like
mid mission, mid level, you can switch.
yeah, like you can it's almost like you're switching weapons in a way. Like
Interesting.
you are in like
Okay.
you're in the same spot and you
Yeah.
like you flip between like spider lady or horseman, spider lady or
Hmm.
horseman, and like depending if you're gonna like round the corner to try to like it does feel very it has a kind of like more of like a strategic duel aspect to it as opposed to like a spaceship style stealth action sequence. So I'm excited. I
Interesting.
think I'm fingers crossed that Wild Bastards will kind of like capitalize on all the stuff that we're thinking like it's the gameplay's sort of missing here from Void Bastards.
Uh,
I think there's potential there.
I'll let you
indeed.
test that out for me.
Ha ha
We'll have
ha.
to
Yeah,
see
no problem, no
how the
problem.
reviews roll in. And speaking of reviews, maybe I'll kick us off here this time.
Please.
Void
Please
Bastards
do it in the accent though.
Void Bastards. From Dee Dee. We'll channel Dee Dee from Let Me Show. Void Bastards. I'm gonna give it a 6.5. About the same as Nightmare Reaper. About the same as Void Bastards, 6.5. About the same as Nightmare Reaper. I feel like really great art. I think the general flow of getting into a ship and running around for 5 minutes and looting stuff is fun, but I don't really know that it does much more than that. it's fun for that kind of 5 minutes, but I don't know that it really has that kind of lasting engagement to it. The crafting system I'm mixed on. I think the ship environments are well done, but you kind of start to see the patterns after a while, and you're like, okay. Um, I mean, it's well done, but I don't know, it feels like it's lacking variety in a way. I didn't like the turrets at all. I know that there's ways to like counter those later, but I felt really hamstrung by them and not having the kind of strategic options that I wanted. Yeah, I kept thinking that I would wanted to be playing Wild Bastards instead, but instead I just wanted to be playing Heat Signature, I think. Stay tuned and a half for sure. And yeah, I think that like, this game isn't a 10 out of 10. I think it's totally fine for what it's going for. And yeah, I think it's a perfectly okay game, and lots of games are going to be perfectly okay games. Not everyone's going to be a Titanic generational genre defining moment. And that's okay. Maybe Wild Bastards will be that. We'll have to wait and see in 3 days.
I'll go next. I'm gonna give it a 6. Um, it just it just didn't catch me. Like it looks really cool and interesting from the first like half an hour to an hour. But it just kind of didn't, there was not anything that pulled me beyond that. Like I kept waiting for there to be like the second act, but it was the first act again. And I'll say that I think the thing that really got me was the fact that when you die, it does not feel different. And so like, I did a couple of runs and then like I got to some point where I was just like, cool, so I guess I just do the same thing again. And then Scott posted the thing in our little Discord about like there's not a final, like you're not building to anything. I'm like, man, I don't feel compelled to play this more. Which is pretty damning criticism because it's like, well, that's the only reason I'm doing this. Like, I guess for the podcast, but like I'm not gonna, if I don't feel like, if I don't want to play a game more because I'm bored or uninterested by it, then yeah. But it's very cool looking. Um, like I have a couple of small criticisms for the like animation of the enemies, and some of the animation. Like I don't think the enemies were quite as distinctive as I wanted them to be, but I really like the aesthetic of the ship itself. The like cell-ish, 3D-ish, hardline cartoon stuff I think is really cool, and I feel like it's art style that I want more games to adopt. I guess that might take away some of the visual impact of it because it's so unique, but I like that a lot. But that's not enough to build a game off of. So 6, good enough. If you're really into like shooting and scooting around, you might enjoy this game, but it didn't quite have enough depth for me.
Okay, so I picked this game. Not so much, I don't think I fell too much into the trap of me seeing a game and my brain auto-assembling like my expectation of it. I because part of the reason we talked about the marketing is very good. The trailer does kind of suggest like, oh, you're gonna have to make, these important decisions about where you loot and how long you loot for and when you need to call it quits, like when you need to stop rolling the dice and stop risking your run and your loot and make a run for the to get back to the airlock to get back to your ship. Um, I think that idea is there. It's really cool. And while there was a little bit of decision making about which node to go to next on the map and where to loot next, that decision wasn't quite significant enough. And I wish it had been pushed a little further. I wish the immersive sim elements had been pushed a little further. As I mentioned, I did have an enjoyable time playing this game, but I don't think the way I was enjoying it is how the designers intended. I found at a certain point that it was definitely scratching the itch, the FPS meathead itch, of bunny hopping around, going as quickly as possible, shooting things and clicking on oftentimes enemies to click on enemy heads to headshot them, but also clicking on buttons. Importantly, to go through most of the doors in this game, you do not click use on the actual door. You have to click use on a button to the right of the door. And that flow state of switching to the right weapon and attacking the enemies and then looking around and finding that loot and picking it up and then just, bunny hopping some more and oh, I'm getting shot at by a turret and turning, whipping my camera around and clicking on the door to open it and to jump through out of the way of that turret shooting me was pretty satisfying. And I think, frankly, I'll probably play the game a bit more. I suspect. So, but all that to say, in your game that features a first-person perspective and shooting, when opening doors is the thing scratching the FPS itch, that is a problem because, as I mentioned, I do not like the enemy design in this game. Thankfully, when you kill them, a lot of them give apart in an enjoyable way, which is good. That does help. But a while back we were talking about how in an FPS game, your hands and your guns are extremely important because in a way that is the representation of your character in the game world. And it's super important that the weapons look good, feel good, and are fun to use because that is how you're interacting with the game world, is that your primary ways that you're shooting at things. And you're talking about the trouble with the enemies not having many frames of animation. Well, the guns have about two, and literally two, and that is unacceptable. Positively unacceptable.
4 frames would have been the difference maker.
Absolutely. They kind of wobble around a little bit as you're kind of moving, which is like good enough. But I mean, come on, have an artist, take their lunch break, order in, sit down, add a few more frames, and make that stuff, satisfying to use. If you're not going to make it a satisfying like looting and decision-making experience, then you gotta make the shooting. Enjoyable. So anyway, so Void Bastards is coming down on my list as 4.5. It's just ahead of One Way Heroics, which I think One Way Heroics is probably a better like total package. It just so happens that I'm more into FPS games than I am RPGs. And there you have it. The game is not so bad. The game definitely is good enough that I'm very much looking forward to Wild Bastards. So I have also high hopes.
Yeah, I think my similar games list here I've sort of put out into 2 groups. And one is like the immersive sim roguelike experience group, and the other one is like actually good like shooter rogue games, which is a growing list. Like it didn't used to be this way, but we're getting some quality titles here. So immersive sim group, we've mentioned Wild Bastards is coming up in a couple days here, fingers crossed. Heat Signature I talked a lot about. Space Beast Terror Fright I think is supposed to be interesting, or it's a much more aliens oriented FPS style derelict crawler. You got Duskers, which is you are controlling robots in a derelict vessel, and like no jumping to different derelicts. But you're controlling them through like a command line to interface, which is it's almost like a text adventure game in a way, which is very interesting. And then 2 like AAA entries into this. One is an actual DLC for Prey that we mentioned before called Prey Moon Crash. And I think this kind of started the FPS, like big budget shooter rogue foray in a way. I don't know if it's the best roguelike experience per se, but also it kind of prerequisites you having to know like the systems of the base game in order to really come to grips with it. But anyway, That and Deathloop, which is put out by I think Arcane Studios, who put out Dishonored. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, both of those like AAA level experiences. I believe those are supposed to be like very simmy, but maybe a little bit longer of your standard run. Now for roguelike shooter games, the thing that come to mind the most for me here is RoboQuest, which has the like the cell shading, much more 3D, a lot higher frame rate, Doom style mechanics, and importantly, you have the when you shoot the gun, the little pew pew letters appear next to the muzzle. Very important. Gunfire Reborn, which is like a co-op animal shooter with magic powers. You got Fury Unleashed, which I have it on this list. And why did I put it on here? There's a good reason why I put it on here. Oh yeah, this is like it's like a Metal Slug style run and gun shooter, which I think is supposed to be neat and interesting. I don't know that belongs in the first person. Anyway, Mortal Sin, you should check out. That one is actually like a very interesting, like almost Dark Souls style first person like melee combat system. And we couldn't end this without talking about the Andrew Harshman simulator, Mullet Mad Jack, which is a
Got him.
a 90s long-haired, bemulleted anime YouTube influencer robillionaire killing simulator.
For the audience listening at home, Andrew merely has long hair, not a mullet.
Yes, but I'm also
Sadly.
sure I
After I play
guarantee
Mullet
that
Mad Jack, though, I'll be headed to the barbershop.
Andrew also drives around in a early 90s Ferrari and has cyberpunk sunglasses that he wears with
Indeed.
his cool katana leather jacket.
Well, the way I was describing the way I was playing the game, speed running around and jumping everywhere. I think, yeah, I got to check out Mullet Mad Jack, which is all about speed, speed, speed. You got to get to the level as quick as possible. I did not know it had rogue elements.
Yeah, it is a much more palatable version of Post Void that I tried playing for 30 seconds and almost had an aneurysm playing. It was just so visually just like not disturbing, but just like what if like TV static was a video game and like that with like flashes and everything. Anyway, Mullet Mad Jack, much better experience, arguably faster even somehow. But yeah, give some of those 25 games that I just mentioned a look through. But yeah, that's gonna do it for our Void Bastards episode. We're gonna close up the airlock on this one, and we're gonna jump deep into the warped nether reaches of the nebula for a drum roll, please, a Scott pick of Inscription. Spooktober is coming a little early this year with a game that I think genre bends the definition of what is roguelite and roguelike or whatever to the extreme. And very importantly, if you're hearing this, like, oh, I think I've heard about it, Inscription, before. You should, as Colin has pointed out repeatedly, do not look up anything about this game.
Yeah.
Play through it first. Hint,
I'm
hint,
gonna
Andrew.
spoil. I'm pretty sure so I've played through it. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna give it a 9.5. But it's very good and it's better if you know less about the game.
And I will say this, having just beaten it again a couple days ago, it does hold up on a second playthrough. But
Ooh,
yes,
excellent.
the I think like a full like point of that 9.5 is from like the first playthrough experience. And just yeah. So Andrew, you got some homework to
Duly
do.
noted. All right.
But yeah,
Thank you for the reminder.
that'll be our horror show for next episode. And to play us out from this one, we're gonna have some tunes as your oxygen is running low, and that derelict scrap heap you've looted is now being boarded by menacing pirates, fresh off of the streets of Glasgow.